But Mark, let's close out the podcast taking a look at a topic from the NFL draft, as now we are down to, 30 teams that are now locked up. The Packers might be a little happy that the Saints lost because now they get the 30th pick in the draft and not the 31st or 32nd. But before we get into everything, just want to pitch mostvaluablepodcasts.com, where you can catch MVP each and every day. Make sure to check out mostvaluablepodcast.com. Hit that bookmark so you're always caught up to date with MVP. But Mark, we're talking about the NFL draft. We're taking a look at a specific team, and that is the Miami Dolphins. And the Dolphins right now are the 13th pick in the first round. One position that they could go to is quarterback, because you got Ryan Tannehill, but he's coming up to the end of his deal, and really, is he the future for the Miami Dolphins? Should they go with someone younger? So we're going to take a look at, first off, the options for the Dolphins in the first round of this draft, maybe, and then kind of branch out from there. The first thing I'm going to ask you, though, they're at 13. So they're out of Kyler Murray. They're out of Dwayne Haskins territory. Because of that, should the Dolphins trade up in the draft to get either Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins?
I would say no way. Just no. I mean, you've got a quarterback that you can use, and I know that there are Dolphin fans out there who are getting mad and saying, no, we're not going to have Ryan Tannehill come back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy that. I don't think you're going to have necessarily a better option, but especially not in the draft. I mean, if you're going to miss out on Dwayne Haskins, Kyler Murray, which personally I'm not even sold on Kyler Murray in the NFL, so really for me it's Dwayne Haskins, and that's it. It's not worth trading up, because what are you going to do, trade all the way up to number one to guarantee you get him? I mean, you don't want to trade up to number two and have somebody trade above you.
Well, and that's the thing of, will the Cardinals take him at number one? And really, if you trade for two, will it end up being like the Eagles and Rams, where the Eagles traded up for two, then the Rams traded up for one because somebody wanted a quarterback higher than you? I don't know what you do. And the one thing that I'm glad you brought up, that you believe that Tannehill isn't going anywhere for this year, because I'm sure you saw it, but just in case no one else did, on our mock draft from last week, we had a comment of Dayaus, Dayaus, and here's what his comment read: do you pay attention to all NFL teams, because Tannehill will not be playing for Miami this year? Your comment about how Miami is saying no, we have Tannehill, makes no sense. Miami may not look to draft a quarterback this year or trade up for one, but one thing is for sure, Tannehill, and then in all caps, will not be a Miami Dolphin in 2019. And I replied to that and kind of went back and forth. Here's my reaction here is, I'm with you. Tannehill's your quarterback next year. Like, it is plain and simple. He will be back unless he is injured. He's your quarterback next year. Yes, there's a potential out this offseason. I don't think the Dolphins do that, because the Dolphins have, in my mind, two decisions that they have to make. The first are three decisions. One of them, me and you have already made for them, because I agree with you. The first one is, do we trade up for a quarterback? I say no, because in order to trade up for the first overall pick or the second overall pick, we've already said on podcasts what the Rams and Eagles gave up. If you're trading up with the Cardinals, you're giving up the multiple first, maybe that was a third and a fifth, I think, from the Rams, and then a first and a third next year. That's about the asking price you would get for the first overall pick. And if I'm the Dolphins, I say no way to that. My question is, and this is the second step to this, is if you're not going to go with Haskins or Murray to trade up, do you go ahead and take a quarterback in the later rounds? And in that case, you're settling on, do you take a Drew Lock later on? Do you take a Daniel Jones later on? A Will Grier? A Ryan Finley? Do you think the Dolphins in maybe the second or third round should go ahead and take a Drew Lock, a Daniel Jones, or a Will Grier this year, or do what the reports have seemed to where they're saying, hey, we're going to wait till next year and take one of the first rounders in 2020?
Yeah, I don't think it's worth it, is really what it comes down to. I mean,
to draft
you
one
can
this
grab
year?
one of these guys who, in a second or third round, who, sure, maybe turns into something, but I highly doubt that they will. It's just one of those situations where it's a silly gamble for something that I don't think is going to work, and you're just going to be drafting another quarterback next year. It's just not a reason to do it in my eyes, where basically you're just kind of wasting a draft pick. And you can get quality players in the second, third, fourth round, but I don't know that they would be that willing to give up something that's going to be valuable to them.
See, and that's why, to me, the thing that I look to is there's only one quarterback in this draft that I would look at if I am the Miami Dolphins. And I know right away people are going to be like, well, Drew Lock, Daniel Jones. The only one I look at if I'm the Dolphins is Will Grier. And I'm not saying trade up for him. Like, obviously, you're not going to take him with the 13th pick. You're not going to trade up for him in the first because he's not going to go that high. He's not even, in my mind, a first-round talent for a quarterback unless it's the Lamar Jackson treatment where a team wants to take him with the 32nd pick and trade up for that so they get the 50-year option on him. I'm looking at it where if he's available, because I think he could be a second, third rounder, maybe more of a second, because I think that a team that is quarterback hungry, that didn't get Haskins, didn't get Murray, is going to go ahead and take a Will Grier maybe earlier than he should. If he is available at 48, which a lot of things have to happen, he's got to pass through the Giants, who if they don't go quarterback could go with him there. He's got to pass through Tampa Bay, who although they are going with Jameis Winston this year, could still take a Will Grier at 39. He's got to pass through maybe Washington at 46, who could take a quarterback. Denver at 41, who could take a quarterback. If he gets, though, to 48, he's a guy that if I'm Miami, I might think about pulling the trigger with the 48th overall pick, because Will Grier is a guy to me that out of the second and third and everyone behind Murray and Haskins, he has the most potential to me. The only thing that I think is a huge red flag for him is his mechanics, where, like I've said on the Primetime Podcast, it's not as bad as Tim Tebow's was, where Tim Tebow had the full circular arm motion going on, and it was like basically when he went to throw, you kind of knew he was throwing because it took him so long to get the ball out of his hands. It's not that bad, but he does have to kind of make that motion a little bit quicker because he does have a kind of hitch in it. But if I'm the Dolphins, I'm okay with that, because if I'm bringing back Ryan Tannehill this year, all right, let me take a Will Grier at 48, and he can just sit behind Tannehill for this year or next year, depending on how long it takes him to develop. If he'll be like a Mahomes and he's ready year 2, or if he'll be like an Aaron Rodgers, where Aaron, I believe, sat 2 years before they forced Brett Favre out of town, and Aaron took the starting role.
Yeah, and I think that they certainly could try and get somebody to kind of lock him up. I mean, somebody who is starting to get talked about a little bit, that I'm not sure I 100% agree with, Daniel Jones, the quarterback from Duke, who at the end of December did really well against Temple in his bowl game, and now he's saying he got a first-round grade, and that's part of the reason why he decides to go into the draft. And and people are kind of linking him to some teams that have a Ryan Tannehill, or teams that maybe Blake Bortles is in the same situation, but maybe you could argue that have a Blake Bortles, a Jameis Winston, a guy who is like, we have somebody who can start today. We can let him sit. We can let him learn, like you're saying, a Patrick Mahomes type of thing, a Lamar Jackson type of thing, and he can come out the following year and do it. I mean, I think a lot of teams are going to be looking for that when they saw Patrick Mahomes' success. They're going to be looking for that guy they can stash.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, Patrick Mahomes was not really a classic stash him and wait till later type of thing.
He was a guy that like the Saints and the Chiefs both really wanted.
Exactly. That's a guy who people would have played him day one.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens that the Chiefs had Alex Smith, a very solid quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So they had their own option. They were ready to go. They didn't need him. That's not going to be, I think, the same case potentially for some of these other teams that could draft a Will Grier, a Daniel Jones, something like that. I don't think that they're going to be the same situation where they say, there's no way that we need this guy to start,
mm-hmm.
especially if they end up drafting him at the end of the first round or something like that. That's what Lamar Jackson got.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need him, but they ended up playing him because, well, things started going a little downhill. There was an injury, and then he just never lost the job.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why, for me, I think the Dolphins are in a sticky situation because, first off, all of the main quarterbacks that will be after Dwayne Haskins and Kyler Murray, Drew Lock, Ryan Finley, Daniel Jones, Jarrett Stidham, Will Grier, all of them are playing this weekend in the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. So I think this is the first time that I can remember that most of the quarterbacks that we had are actually in the Senior Bowl and are actually like seniors coming out and are not the young underclassmen that we've seen, or the juniors, I should say, because it's not like basketball where you can be a freshman coming out, where you see like Murray, Haskins, not seniors, so they're not going to be in the Senior Bowl. I think it's going to be interesting to see, if I'm a Dolphin scout, how these quarterbacks do in this game. Of course, it doesn't mean everything, but how do they do in the game? Then it's like, okay, John Gruden and I think it's the Browns coaching staff are the two staffs that are going to be coaching these teams. What do you see from them? How do they interact with these players and the quarterbacks that you're looking at? Maybe asking like a Raiders, like, hey, you were the ones that kind of were with him at the Senior Bowl. What did you think of him? Because I would be surprised if that didn't go on with the different scouts and executives throughout the league. But I say the Dolphins are in a weird situation because if, let's say, you pass on a quarterback this year, like I'm saying it all, in the entire draft, don't take a single quarterback, then next year, you're kind of, in my mind, got to bank on a first-round quarterback. And right now, of course, a full college season can change a lot. Guys can play themselves into a discussion. Some people can play themselves out of it. But right now, early for 2020, the three big names are Tua, Jake Fromm, and then obviously Justin Herbert, who went back this year, who could have been in this year's draft. And if I'm the Dolphins, I look at it, okay, I'm the 13th pick this year. I won 7 games this past year. Am I really going to be that much worse with a new coach coming in? Or is this team going to be in the same part of the draft to where I may miss out on Tua, Fromm, or Herbert? Or next year I may have to trade up like I didn't want to this year because I can't pass on that quarterback next year.
And it's, of course, going to depend on a few things. It depends on what happens during free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Due to some of these teams that we think need quarterbacks, like the Denver Broncos,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Are they filling their needs? Jacksonville Jaguars, are they filling that in free agency? You probably will be a little bit worse when you are getting a new head coach. You're installing new schemes. You're
Mm-hmm.
having your players learn a new offense. So you probably will be worse. But there's not going to be that many teams. A lot of teams have their quarterbacks. A lot of these young quarterbacks have worked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. Someone's going to get Nick Foles, Mahomes, Watson, and Trubisky. All these guys have essentially worked out. Baker Mayfield's looking good. The only ones who are questionable is like a Sam Rosen, Darnold, maybe Josh Allen, who are the fresh rookies. But
you're thinking Josh Rosen.
Those guys are going to get another chance to start.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have another opportunity. You're not going to change them so fast. So the Miami Dolphins are going to probably be in a pretty okay spot to not take a quarterback this year at all and hope for one of those other quarterbacks if this is, once again, the magical quarterback draft where there's a million great quarterbacks just sitting there waiting for teams to take them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the big thing I think about with the Dolphins is if you don't take one at all, there's no guarantee you're going to be in the top of the draft. And the thing that is interesting, too, is as I say that, I looked back and looking at the Dolphins' schedule, I know that's woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I'm going to say it anyways. Realistically, they should have been a 5-11 team because their Patriot win was a miracle, and they were lucky to win it. And then also the game against Chicago, yes, Brock the Cock-a-doodle-doo went out and played well, but also they were kind of lucky to win that one as well against Chicago in overtime. So, I mean, you could be sitting there right now, you're 13th, but if they lost those two games, they would be, let's see, strength of schedule is there. They would have been the 5th pick in the draft. So just because they won those two games, they went from the 5th pick in the draft, 2 picks above the Giants, all the way down to the 13th pick this year. So, I mean, there is a chance that the Dolphins could be top 5 next year. Hey, we're going to be in a good situation to get one of the top quarterbacks. I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket because you never know what's going to happen the next regular season. And if I'm the Dolphins, I would always go ahead and maybe 2nd, 3rd round. Only if you like them. If you like a Will Grier, if you like a Daniel Jones, if you like a Drew Lock, then draft one of them this year. Because what you can always do is what, let's say, the Patriots did with Jimmy Garoppolo. You can always do what many said the Redskins might have done with Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins was one of those 2nd, 3rd round quarterbacks as well. If you get a Tua next year, you can always find a team that, hey, Will Grier is developing nicely. We can trade him for something. We can trade him to another team that might like him also and needs that and is looking for that franchise quarterback, that future quarterback that they might see in him. So that's why for the Dolphins, my draft plan would be I am leaving this draft with a quarterback that I like. It's just they're probably going to have to do that in the 2nd and 3rd, and then my target may still be a 1st-round quarterback next year, depending on where I am. But that might be, like, some people may be sitting there going, well, Ricky, that's crazy. Why waste a pick on a quarterback if you're just going to plan to take one in the 1st round next year?
Which I 100% agree with. There's no reason to draft a quarterback this year if you're pretty sure you're going to draft a quarterback next year. Because your whole plan is basically draft a guy this year for fun.
Just in case we win games.
Yeah, I mean, just in case. But even so, you're saying there's going to be 3, 4, 5 first-round quality quarterbacks next year.
We're saying 3 for sure right now, but anything can happen.
Yeah, you're going to probably be pretty safe to be able to get one of these guys next year. I don't think you need to invest in wasting a pick this year in the draft. I mean, if you want to look at it, you can look at the Pro Bowl picks for a team like Chicago and having 3rd and 7th round and 5th round players making the Pro Bowl. They're quality players, and it's just not worth wasting a pick on somebody that you know is not going to play. Ask the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Kaiser, you know?
True.
How did that work out? They never really did anything of any value with him, and now they have Baker Mayfield.
They drafted him, and then they took Baker with the number 1 overall pick.
Exactly. It was just a waste. And
now Deshaun Kaiser gets to back up Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. But any final thoughts you've got on this topic?
No, I'm not going to be surprised if the Dolphins draft a quarterback, but I don't expect it.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. Should the Dolphins trade up for a first-round quarterback? That's number 1. Number 2, should they take a quarterback in this, just any round of this draft, 2019? Then the third part is, if they don't, are they going to be in a good position to get a quarterback next year in the first round for 2020? That's going to do it for the Onside Kick this week. Want to thank everyone for listening to us on YouTube this week, listening to us on podcast services around the world. Make sure to check us out on patreon.com/mostvaluedpodcast. Help support the channel. Make sure we can keep doing what we do for you guys each and every week. Make sure to also follow us on Twitter at mostvaluablepod. You can go ahead and mostvaluablepodcast.com. Catch MVP each and every day. And last but not least, if you have an iTunes account, you have an Apple Podcast account, make sure and go and rate and review the Onside Kick on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Want to thank you guys yet again for watching us on YouTube, listening to us on podcast services around the world. And as always, have a good day, everybody.